I just want to clarify to everybody, I'm a big Star Trek fan. You don't got to be a Star Trek fan to understand this. In the 90s, we had new Star Trek shows.
Yes.
They were widely popular. Star Trek The Next Generation was one of the most popular shows of all time. It was syndicated on 3 networks. That's huge.
Mm-hmm.
After that, they said, what do we do now? I don't know. Do a prequel. Now, a lot of people do like Enterprise, but it's a prequel. We're just like, go back in time.
I thought it was boring.
And take existing stories. Where are we now? Discovery. CBS, a prequel. Mm-hmm. Stacey Abrams is the president.
Terrible.
They're accused
Terrible.
of ripping off the story. Here's the best part. They start Picard, which is finally, the 90s Star Trek gets a sequel series. And what is it about? The first season is basically member berries. Member Riker? Remember Picard? Remember Data? And it's like, okay, yeah, I'm a big fan of all those things. It's fun to see them again. What's season 2 about? They go back in time.
They're like, remember,
because
white
something
supremacy?
happened in 2024 to turn Earth into a human supremacist planet.
Ooh.
And the
Really
fascists
boring.
must be stopped. And I'm like, why is Star Trek at the same time that I live?
No,
I want to
that's
watch
not where it
spaceships.
should
Well,
be.
also,
Exactly.
here's the thing. Even
Spaceships,
if you...
space,
yes.
aliens.
Yeah.
Well, this is what's so
Weird
boring about
stuff.
it. Like, even if you're trying to cram your worldview into something where it otherwise doesn't belong, try to come up with some clever analogy for it instead of going, human supremacy. We're going to talk about human supremacy. Do you guys get it? And watching at home, do you get it? Do you get what we're actually talking about? It's so obnoxious.
Well,
Are
that's
people
like
gay
you
on the new
see-
Star Trek?
What?
Are there any gay people in the
Well,
new Star Trek?
in the reboot movies, they made Sulu gay. Like
Okay.
they did a scene that didn't need to be in the movie. That was this is one of the issues.
I think Takei was
Okay.
actually not cool with that, even though he's gay.
Right, he said make new characters.
Yeah.
So in the movies, they did a scene where it's like they're coming to port or whatever, and then Sulu runs up to a guy who's got like a daughter, and they kiss, and it's just like that did nothing for the movie. I don't care if the characters are gay. John Constantine. Do you guys know who John Constantine is? DC character. They had a movie with Keanu Reeves. It wasn't really true to the original character. He's an amazing character. This character has been bi since 1992. So he has boyfriends and girlfriends, and it's like a part of his character arc. So when I see a show, I'm watching DC's Legends of Tomorrow, and he's got like a boyfriend. I'm not like, why? I'm like, oh, I get it. His motivation is that his boyfriend's soul was trapped in hell. I'm like, yeah, I understand that. I have no issue with that. That's fine. It's when they take characters and they put things in plots that don't make sense for the sake of just virtue signaling to their audience, like, look what we did.
It
Yeah,
feels
that's
shoehorned
right.
in. I feel like Chris Ruffo found something that, like, with one of the Disney directors saying that they're trying to make like 50% of
Yep.
the characters LGBTQ.
Well, that wasn't just the director saying that. They have that, I think, on their like mission. I think they have that written down that by
bananas.
2050 it would
It's
be.
insane.
And that's just not a very interesting way to do it. It's not. It doesn't make for good stories to say, I'm going to have this character with this specific characteristics. When you're writing characters, you have to like listen to your characters. You have to invent them. They have to be authentic and real. And you can't just like apply stuff to your characters and say, here's my character Mary, and she's going to be all of these things, and I'm just going to make that work and shove them into that
Here's-
character. It has to be real.
I'll tell you why I think woke plot writing doesn't work. You have to understand the motivations to feel for the story. And the example I'll give you is when the Batman animated series won, I think it was the first Emmy, I could be wrong, for an animated series. And it was with their episode in the origins of Mr. Freeze. Do you guys know this story? Mm-mm. Comic book villains used to be one-dimensional. I'm going to take over the world. And then in the Batman animated series, they write the story about a scientist whose wife is dying of a terminal disease, so he cryogenically freezes her and then starts misappropriating corporate funds from his job to try and find a cure. When the boss finds out, he says, you're stealing my money, shut it down. He's like, no, you'll kill Nora, you can't. So they get into a fight with the security guards, the cryochemicals spray all over him, he becomes Mr. Freeze. His entire motivation's that his wife is dying and he will stop at nothing to save her life. And so it's kind of sad. But he's a bad dude because he hurts people. And then it ends with him in his prison cell, like saying like, oh, Nora, and he's holding a snow globe. And it's like miserably sad this guy became a villain. That's wow, those motivations, man. When you see these woke stories like The Craft, where they put a spell on a guy to turn him gay, I'm like, what is your motivation here?
Yeah, why do it?
Haha, let's make a jock gay. And I'm like, I don't understand what that has to do with like your motivations in life. Are you just mean people?
That's LGBTQ representation, Tim. They're trying to tell us that that's where gay people come from.
That's
what they're trying to say.
In Legends of Tomorrow, John Constantine, he's this he's like an exorcist. He has a boyfriend. his boyfriend's soul gets damned to hell, and this makes him distraught. I'm like, I understand that motivation. I don't, have attraction to dudes, but I can understand caring about someone. I understand that motivation. A lot of these woke shows are motivated by weird things, like when Brie Larson in Captain Marvel steals the clothing of the guy on the motorcycle. I'm like, what was the purpose of that plot point? Was it to show us that Brie is just a bad person and that feminists are mean? I don't why in the story is like she's going to steal a guy's clothes and steal his motorcycle from him.
And I've said this before a number of times, but it's really important whenever you're making anything, and this holds true for what we're doing with Freedom Tunes as well, even though we're talking about politics. When I'm making something, I'm not thinking what point can I get across, what's the agenda here. That's very rarely the case. It's usually just looking at a situation and saying, what do I think is funny? And obviously, because I am a conservative person, the things that I'm going to think are funny are probably things other conservative people are going to think is funny when they look at the issue, or are funny when they look at the issue. If you go into it going, I desperately need the audience to know every single piece of my political worldview related to this issue, you're just going to make garbage. It's going to be really, really boring.
Someone super chatted us, and we'll go back in the super chat section and read through it, but I do want to point out a bit of what your point was, and this is from Torsnolarm or whatever, but he was saying that before the Empire, before the Dark Days, and this was another who tweeted this, I'm sorry, not tweeted, who posted it, Eddie. He was saying before the Empire, before the Dark Days, all of these social media platforms were conservative, and that's mostly true. Remember when Phil DeFranco, he hosted Gary Johnson on his show, Libertarian. Mike.com, which went woke, originally was all about libertarianism and Ron Paul.
Interesting.
Twitter was
I don't remember that.
Donald Trump and conservatives, and it was dominated. Twitter was a lot of journalists who are, talking, and a lot of news organizations getting no traction. And then conservatives were generating massive attention and engagement. Now all these platforms were taken over by the far left, kicked out all the people on the right, and they become stagnant, dry, boring, and broken.
Well, because they're only interested in their ideological perspective. They're not interested in new ideas. They're interested in entrenching and enforcing the existing ones.
It's so troubling that all these companies have become ideological in one direction or another, because then it also leads other companies to also want to become ideological. So now we have Disney trying to inject whatever liberal values, but then we have the Daily Wire, who, is a news company, right? They hire journalists, they make news podcasts, but they're also getting in the kids' entertainment business. I'm not sure if they're going to inject any values in their content, but it just sucks that every company now has developed a political angle one way or another, because I don't know if that's what the market has to bear. We force it onto these companies.
Well, the Daily Wire realized that, as Andrew Breitbart said, politics is downstream from culture. And for too long, conservatives have neglected to be producing any kind of cultural content. Typically, conservatives just complain about stuff.
Yep.
And then they're content to complain about it as... It's like, imagine being on the Titanic and complaining that it's sinking, and then not doing anything to save yourself, save others, or stop the sinking from happening. Mm-hmm. And that's what it was for a very, very long time. The Daily Wire is like, let's start bailing water, or at least build a life raft. So their content probably will have values in it, but it's going to be values we recognize and probably like.
Well, and the values should come into the work in an organic fashion.
Exactly.
As well. I mean, that's what it should be like. I remember this was years ago now, but I was commissioned to write a play for the Williamstown Theater Festival. And I was working with a director who was older, and she was single, and she was trying to decide if she should have a child, even though she didn't have a partner. And so we were talking about this, and I was like, okay, well, this is what she wanted to do a play about. I was like, okay, cool. So we started digging into it, and very, very organically, the take of the play started to be, no, you probably shouldn't have a child without, a family structure, without, not intentionally. You probably should not intentionally create a fatherless child, on purpose, just to satisfy your own pleasure at this point. And that was a very organic perspective. And it ended up not getting produced and getting me into a lot of trouble. And I didn't stay at the festival very long.
Yeah.
But I didn't go into it saying, I want to write a play about the integrity of the family unit. That's just sort of what happened. I wrote a play that was about taking responsibility for your reproductive material.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I would agree with you. This stuff has to come about organically. All entertainment is going to have values in it. People just can't escape this. And it's part of the reason why storytelling has been so central to human culture and civilization, because we get our moral values from the stories that we tell each other, the stories that we're told as children and that we pass on to our children. And so the idea that they're going to be value neutral is incoherent. It's basically an impossibility.
There's no point to a value neutral story necessarily, because how would it exist?
And it's not even possible. The question is, are these perspectives developing organically because someone's trying to tell a story and their worldview is inevitably going to work itself into it? Or is this a piece of propaganda which exists explicitly to get me to accept something I might not otherwise accept?
That's something interesting too that I think a lot about, like Bible stories, right? So you have a lot of, there's been a lot of critique about the Bible and like from a liberal worldview that this is, anti-everybody or whatever. But if you look at the Bible, like the stories are not telling you how things should be necessarily in the Old Testament.
Yeah, it's interesting.
They're telling you how things are, right? These are our ancestors expressing their perspective on life and culture and the world as they're living in it. And they're giving you that perspective.
No, it's an interesting combination, because there are obviously moments that are instructive, but it's not as if because something is described in scripture that it's being approved.
Mm-hmm, exactly. And that's so interesting. And there's, we could go on about this for a while, but there's so many interesting stories where you can see, the trajectory of something is not what you thought. Like when Joseph gets sold into slavery in Egypt, and it turns out that if Joseph hadn't been sold into slavery in Egypt, all of the Israelites would have starved to death.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what was the right thing to do? I don't know. Like, that's fascinating.
Exactly. What I want to mention this. I don't take a more liberal interpretation. I really do believe in the Bible. But at the same time, I find it fascinating that basically every religious text that I'm familiar with is narrative in some sense. It's not just a list of things that you should and shouldn't do. Right. There's some of that, right, when you look at a catechism, for example, that lays out the rules, but it's so clear that humans understand through story in the strongest possible way.
Well, that's the Greeks. It's everything.
Here's something interesting. The old stories, I read this, so you guys will have to tell me if it's correct or not. But I was reading this opinion piece about heroes of the olden days, like Hercules and these ancient heroes who would challenge the gods, fight against them, or the Titans. Today, our heroes are all a part of the establishment and the authority. Superman and Batman, well, as much as they're sometimes at odds, like Batman is a vigilante, they still call upon him and he still upholds the status quo. Superman does the same thing. I think a lot of comics have done a great job exploring these ideas in real ways that were thought-provoking, challenging certain rigid moral standards. We had Captain America. He's basically propaganda in World War II. Then you have this arc where he becomes nomad. He's like, I can't stand for this. Or you have Civil War, where Captain America's like, I will not stand for the government forcing people to register. And then you have the industrialist Tony Stark, who's like, do what the government wants, the corporation working with government. These ideas were really interesting, and it made these comics from one-dimensional to multi-dimensional, challenging our own worldview, but in positive ways. Now, instead of being like, here's an interesting character arc. Captain America believes in freedom. The government wants you to register. Mm-hmm. How would he handle that? Now it's just like, you're all racist and you're all bigots, and bigots should be punished and racists should be excised. So the wokeness in content is just it's reverting back to the one-dimensional aspect of old comics. That's just
there was such
boring.
An interesting thing that happened and bizarre when Barack Obama became president and when he was running, which is all of the people who had said up to that point question authority started saying, trust the government, the president is your friend. And it's like, it was almost... people forgot that Barack Obama was just a politician, just like all the other politicians. He's very similar to all of the politicians who have ruled our country.
Yeah, but he had that painting that said hope.
Yeah,
sure, right. Yeah. Well, Shepard Fairey had the painting.
He was supposed to end racism, though. I feel like that was supposed to be the deal with Obama. He was
but
supposed
now,
to end the racism.
Yeah, that was. But
he made it worse.
Now people say that the fact that we had a black president doesn't mean anything at all in terms of the progress away from being a racist country.
Exactly. And they'll never say these kinds of things.
Which I find it bizarre.
No, exactly. They'll never say these kinds of things beforehand, right? So when you're supposed to vote for Obama, it's, look, this is going to be a giant step towards ending racism. Of course, they didn't say, Well, look, if we elect Obama, that is not at all going to
It
prove that this
means
is a
nothing. It
non-racist
means
country.
nothing.
You
But
know, vote
Obama-
based on values and not skin color.
Obama wasn't even extremely liberal, as I understand. I think he was against gay marriage when he announced.
He was
at his
against gay
time-
marriage when he
also-
announced.
But hold on.
But you had a
that
thing
was a very
happening-
different time. He was pro universal health care. He campaigned on that in 2007 and 8.
He also voted against the Born Alive Act in like 2003 or 2002 as a senator. So he was very far to the left on abortion. And on a lot of economic issues he was as well. I think basically no one in public life was in favor of gay marriage if they had a political career at that point.
Yeah,
That's
Hillary
right.
Clinton, I think in 2016, she wasn't even in favor of gay marriage. Like leaked emails came out or something. Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. But if you want to check out the full show live, tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. And if you want more special access content, head over to timcast.com and become a member. Your membership helps sustain this company, keep our journalists employed, makes this show happen, and you will get access to exclusive members-only segments of the Timcast IRL podcast, and there's a massive library to check out. So again, go to timcast.com or tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., and we'll see you all there.